Welcome to Inclusive Cyber, your front row seat to understand how a diverse mix of voices is not just necessary, but essential to protect our most sensitive computer networks and personal data. I'm your host, Danny Magallanes, and through my podcast, we shine the spotlight on the heroes and trailblazers from every corner of society who are redefining the diversity, equity, and inclusion frontier. Every episode is a step towards a cyber community that's as varied as it is united, where everyone has the keys to unlock their potential and the power to protect our digital world. Join us on this journey where every listen, every share, every dialogue inches us closer to this new reality. Hello, and welcome to another episode. I know you're probably expecting a guest, but this week, changing things up a little bit. I want to be transparent with all of you and what it is to run a video podcast or just a podcast in general, but changing things up a little bit more relaxed. I don't have my coat. I'm drinking my yerba mate. Hopefully, they're going to be sponsors of the show in the future. Joking, not joking, but just taking a different approach. So this week we do not have a guest, so you are all stuck with me. The reason for this, it's really, really hard to find people and mesh up our respective schedules to one, not only meet initially, and this is primarily done online virtually through Riverside, the platform that I use to record. So coordinating schedules to do that initial meet and greet and to kind of identify the flow or the main topics that we're going to be discussing for each guest. And then second, we still have to record the episode. So that's another time that we need to find schedules to align. So a quick shout out to Isabella. She's studying at Metro State University in cybersecurity. So special shout out with her. She's working hard behind the scenes, trying to identify guests, reaching out to them. And I'm also supporting her as well, reaching primarily to a lot of people on LinkedIn. And just to make sure that, we have guests every week. And again, it's very, very hard. On top of that is learning a whole new environment of video and audio editing, something that I never, ever would have imagined doing. I remember back when I was in college many, many decades ago, I messed around with Adobe Premiere, and it was a very it just wasn't user-friendly. Let's just put it that way. The tools that I have now, just night and day, they make things a little bit easier, but it's still time-consuming. So the other reason that I'm doing this, and just depending on if this episode resonates with all of you, is just to provide a buffer zone that if we cannot find anybody, I'm hoping to do maybe minimum once a month to give me that buffer so I'm not stressing out and trying to find a guest to be on the show. Because my hope is to record 52 video podcasts and then obviously audio versions of them this year. So far, I haven't missed a week. It's been a roller coaster, to say the least, and have learned a lot from the guest here. But the way I want to structure this episode is very similar to what I've seen work, at least listening to other podcasters, in particular, Cyberwire Daily with Dave Bittner. And that podcast is roughly about 20, 30 minutes daily episodes that talk about the threat intelligence and just what is happening when it comes to cybersecurity, what cyber criminal groups are targeting industries or particular companies, what nation states, who are they targeting, primarily here in the US, but also globally. And talking to network defenders, because it's not about all doom and gloom. So I'll definitely put that in the show notes for you all to take a look at. But here in this episode, I want to discuss 4 buckets or themes. It might change in future iterations, but for now, I'm selecting 4 themes. So the first theme is looking at DEI challenges from a macro perspective. And what I mean about that, there is a lot of news stories, both online and on print magazines. Yeah, I still read magazines. And just talking about the challenges, whether the particular article is for DEI and the value it brings, or it argues against it, that it's spreading reverse racism, but just kind of looking at that from a 50-foot, 1,000-foot lens. The other one is self-help or mental self-awareness. And what I mean by that, talking to a lot of people in my network, new people that I've had the opportunity to meet through this podcast, and focusing on ourselves. There's a lot of pain out there. I'm consuming podcasts about geopolitical topics throughout the world. There's just a lot of pain, but trying to ground yourself, both mind, body, and soul or spirit, is essentially what this bucket is. We need to take care of ourselves. And a good analogy is when we board airplanes. They go through the whole security spiel that a lot of people probably don't pay attention, but it says if you're with elderly or you're traveling with kids, put your mask on first, because if you don't do that in some type of mid-air emergency, then you will not be able to help people around you. So that's my concept. Like one of my previous guests mentioned, if we don't take care of what we eat and put into our bodies, then we're not going to function properly. And that also goes for working out, making sure that we're healthy, because when we are, we're going to be at our best selves to not only support our loved ones around us, but when people reach out, you're going to have a very optimistic look and help people in need. The other one is acknowledging different perspectives. Everybody has a unique story, their unique culture, gender, etc. And I always flock to people when I hear different stories that I never grew up with. I just have that radical curiosity to learn more and really understand the path that people took for us to meet. So something that I really, look into in acknowledging different voices in any aspect of life. And then the last one is going to be about learning. And I might be all over the place with that one. Any topics about learning, in this case, I'm going to be talking about a book that I'm still in the middle of and trying to wrap up. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start off with the first one, the DEI macro perspective. I have it up here on my screen. The article comes from Harvard Business Review. Why DEI leaders are burning out and how organizations can help. And just the overall gist of this particular article, this topic explores the emotional labor experienced by diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals and human resource professionals engaged in significant DEI work. Despite the growth of DEI roles, especially after George Floyd's murder in 2020, these professionals face high levels of burnout and turnover, largely due to emotional toll of their work. Interviews with 23 HR and DEI professionals revealed the stress, frustration, and need for emotional regulation in the face of apathy and negativity that they've been experiencing. It continues about surfacing, acting, fabricating positive emotions and suppressing negative ones, in particular damaging, exacerbated by societal stereotypes and workplace expectation. So some of the key takeaways that I got from this particular story, it's that emotional labor, and it's prevalent. You're talking to a lot of people that, one, they might not be in a good place or mindset to receive what you're trying to tell them. Typically, when you're taking any type of training, we tend to tune out. I'm sorry, I'm going to plead guilty of that, especially when it comes to cybersecurity training. It's like, okay, click, click. I know this, let's move on type of thing. The other key takeaway of this particular story is the impact of societal stereotypes. So stereotypes exacerbate the emotional toll on DEI professionals, especially women and racial minorities. The other takeaway, outdated DEI paradigms. Many organizations still follow the discrimination and fairness paradigm. which does not value diversity and leads to higher emotional labor. And then the last key point, well, actually two more. The next one is shifting to learning an effective paradigm. So here's some positive aspects that we can learn from. Organizations that adopt this paradigm experience less burnout among DEI professionals by valuing diversity and integrating DEI into core organizational processes. I think I would want to add there, you need to have executive leadership buy-in. If you don't, then that's creating a culture where if the executives don't care about DEI, then nobody else in the practice is going to care. Executives will need to lead up, and kind of something that I would add to that particular positive aspect there. Some other recommendations, this is the last point for this story, is to support DEI professionals. Organizations should conduct regular DEI assessments, integrate DEI values throughout, ensure HR policies are equitable, show top management support, empower DEI roles, and provide resources for social support. I jumped the gun a little bit. Just showing that top management support is definitely key. I never had an official role at any company that I worked for, but I was part of numerous ERG groups in the past and just supporting and learning at the end of the day. Moving on to help in the mental bucket that I mentioned earlier. So it says, again, from the Harvard Business Review, 5 ways to deal with micro stresses draining your energy. It talks about how pervasive the issue of burnout is in professional and personal lives. It doesn't really emphasize any particular career, but I think just as a whole, a lot of people are just burnt out. And what I know personally in cybersecurity, that definitely is the case. In this particular article, it says, emphasizing that while work volume is often blamed, the real problem lies in the explosion of collaborative demands, leading to a new form of stress termed micro stressors. This term is defined as the accumulation of small, often unnoticed stresses resulting from daily interactions that together have a significant negative impact. The research identifies 14 sources of micro stresses, and they're categorized into 3 areas. The first one, those that drain capacity to get work done. The second one, deplete emotional reserves. And the third one is challenge personal identity. Some of the key takeaways here, I'm going to use myself as an example. The way I think I deal with these small little, I would call them asks from you, whether it's from your partner, your spouse, or external colleagues. Hey, do you have a second? And typically we want to be helpful. Sure, I can give you some time. But then when you don't, I guess, regulate or have the willingness to say, no, I can't right now, which is fine. And hopefully your peers, your partners, your friends understand that. But it's hard. It's really, really hard to say, no, I can't do that. But if you don't, it goes back to that mental health that you're not going to be at the best to add any value to any conversation or any project that you're working at. So here it says microstressors is a major contributing factor to burnout. 67% of people in larger organizations citing it as a significant driver of talent loss. How do you measure that, right? Maybe it could be all the incessant meetings that we have to go to that provide very little value, or it could just be a complaining session where you go to these meetings and people are complaining about person X, Y, and Z. That's definitely something we need to be cognizant about. The other one is collaborative demands and increased responsibilities. And now I feel guilty because I'm reaching out to a lot of folks on LinkedIn. Hey, do you want to be a guest on my podcast? And I don't know their home situation, right? I don't know if they have a family. I don't know if they have a partner. I don't know how stressful their work demands are. So now that's something to think about as well. Identifying and addressing microstressors can lead to significant improvements in personal well-being and productivity. So Additionally, they talk about becoming intentional in managing interaction. So the way I interpret that is the power to say no. Maybe not today or right now, but let's schedule a time or have more time to listen to what you're asking or wanting of me. So that definitely makes sense. Furthermore, building a resilient network and tackling micro stressors directly through small concrete steps. It says demographics factor influence micro stressors level, with women and ethnic minorities reporting greater stress in certain areas. And then the last key point for this particular article, organizations and personal strategies are necessary to mitigate the effects of micro stressors, including corporate initiatives to support employees' well-being and individual efforts to manage daily interactions more effectively. That's just trying to be a realist. That's going to be hard to capture, right? How do you capture how many meetings do you have a day? And does that go to your immediate manager or does that go up to another team that is looking at that data? And is it just meetings alone? You could have one meeting that could drain you for the entire day, right? And it could just be a 15, 30-minute meeting, or you can have 10 meetings and be extremely productive. So how you measure that is definitely going to be key. So moving on to the next article, and apologize, Harvard Business Review is just an amazing resource that I just find a lot of nuggets of information that I just want to share. So this one, it's called Building Cross-Cultural Relationships in a Global Workplace. It talks about a story about this particular individual who is securing a job at a Fortune 100 global technology company. They are facing unexpected challenges in building relationship with their new colleagues due to cultural differences. Despite their extensive experience in interacting across cultures, they find it difficult to bond with coworkers in a professional setting and in the new job. So it talks about 6 core elements essential for understanding and navigating cross-cultural professional relationships. It's about place, power, purpose, privacy, presence, and pacing. These elements serve as a guide to recognize and bridging cultural gaps in relationship building, ultimately facilitating more effective and harmonious interactions in the global workplace. It doesn't talk about whether or not this individual is remote or in person. I'm going to make the assumption that it is in person. But I just want to do a quick story. The way I look at different cultures, and it obviously comes from my upbringing. I straddle 2 different cultures, right? When I had the opportunity to go overseas and be at Europe, I just found it extremely fascinating just talking to folks and understanding where they came from, what type of foods they ate, and primarily what type of beers they had or wine. So I was super inquisitive about that. And every time I would meet somebody, I would introduce myself, and then I would ask them how many languages they spoke. And they would look at me perplexed and just shout out the number 4, 5, 7. And it was just amazing. That just gave me that raw energy to engage even more and learn from them. So it was just a fascinating experience. So for me, I can navigate that cross-cultural gauntlet, if you will, but some people have a hard time. And I'm obviously not here putting a blame game on this particular individual's colleagues, but something is definitely needed here. So they talk about cultural challenges in global workplaces. Even individuals with strong backgrounds in cross-cultural interactions, like this individual in the article, can face transitioning issues. There needs to be cultural awareness and appreciation in today's globalization business environment. As evident, the majority of employees work in multicultural teams. The majority of the companies I've been with, they have excellent employee resource groups to talk with people similar to you, but also learn and be a part of other ERG groups so you can understand and adapt. The 6 core elements, as I mentioned before, it's about understanding these elements. Global workers can better navigate cultural differences, leading to more effective communication. And then just bridging that cultural gap, awareness and adaptation to the relationship codes of different cultures can help bridge the cultural gap. So it's all about having that open mindset. There's a term for it, and I know it's gonna come to me obviously after I stop recording, but a growth mindset. That is it, right? And just be inquisitive. Try to remember when you were between the ages 3 and 5 and 6, maybe. You were curious. You wanted to know how things worked. And if we can get back to that mentality, I think we would be in a much better place. So the next topic is about learning. This book is just incredible. And what I do with books, I have a highlighter. For those in audio, I'm holding up my highlighter and I go and mark up the book based on the nuggets of information that I'm learning. And in this particular chapter, so Creativity Inc. is the name of the book. And it's written by Ed Catmull, who is, I want to say, I don't know if he's still the CEO of Pixar. If you all do not know Pixar, they're the creators of Toy Story, all 4 of them, Monsters, Inc., Up, Wall-E, all these great animation stories that tug at the heartstrings there. This is a business book at heart and how to develop teams. But one particular chapter that I'm in, close to the end of the book, Broadening Your View is the name of this particular chapter. But he talks about 8 key points that they stress and they do at Pixar. And I'm just going to read them here real quick. Dailies or solving problems together, research trips, the power of limits, integrating technology and art, short experiments, learning to see, postmortems, and continuing to learn. In that same vein where I'm going with trying to learn. There's just a lot of information here. Initially, I was going to go through and read what I highlighted for each section, but I know this episode is going longer than I wanted it to. But the one that I really liked is learning to see. They create a Pixar university, and it's not virtual. You log onto your computer and access training. It's first-rate technical training, and they provide everything that you can possibly think of. They have art classes, they have yoga, they have breathing techniques. Again, it goes to that holistic individual or mental health, taking care of yourself. Then you can be at your best to create the best story that will resonate with everyone. One thing that they talk about, learning to see, they use art. And I know what everybody's thinking. Well, of course they're teaching art classes in Pixar because it's all about animation. But here, what they do is it's not about learning to see for art's sake, but what art, if you look at a piece of artwork, what emotions does it elicit? But what parts of the art or the image are you focused on? What they do here for this particular training, they ask the students to focus on the negative spaces. So in this particular example, they use a chair. They said the area of space around an object that are not the object itself. For instance, in drawing a chair, the new artist might draw it poorly because they know what a chair is supposed to look like, and that chair in their head, their mental model. Right? The lesson is intended to help students to see shapes as they are, to ignore that part of the brain that wants to turn what is seen into the general notion of a model of a chair. So almost trying to rewire the brain. The brain is an amazing organ, but it's not perfect, right? It creates mental models for shortcuts. And here, we know what a chair looks like. We know what a pen looks like. We know what a motorcycle looks like or a bike. But now it's try to focus on things outside of the bike, right? The empty spaces. They just see more because they've learned how to turn off their mind's tendencies to jump to conclusions. They've added some observational skills to their toolboxes. This is why it is so frustrating that funding for art programs in schools have been decimated. And those cuts stem from a fundamental misunderstanding that art classes are about learning to draw, which they're not, is what he's saying here. In fact, they are about learning to see. And that is just something that really resonates with me. We are trying to decipher codes from our colleagues, from our partners, or anybody that you're trying to win their affection. It's really, really hard. And our mental models can be a hindrance. So here, art doesn't teach you how to draw things, draw faces, or draw hands. It teaches you to see different things. So it's fascinating stuff. I might do a book review on this once I'm done. It's just been an amazing book. But that concludes this episode. I hope everyone enjoyed it. It's a little bit different. The topics and the buckets will change, of course, just depending on the feedback. But one last thing I do want to mention to all the listeners, to everybody who's been supporting me, heartfelt thank you. It means the world to me. If you can share, if you could like, and even the negative comments. I've been telling all my friends, hey, mock my hair, mock my jackets, do something, because negative press is good press in my viewpoint. But with that, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Tune in next week where hopefully we'll have a guest. Until next time.